Welcome back. I will be your captain today, leading you through this panic index for February 26th of 2025. My wife got me this hat at Halloween. I have no idea when I'm going to wear it in a video. So here we are. I figure panic index. Why not? And of course, I'm wearing my Don't Panic Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy jersey with the number 42 because it's got to be 42. Anyways, so what I've got in my hand here is every logo. I've arranged the East from the top to bottom according to the NHL's official standings, and the West the same way. So at the top of the board, where fans, media, the team should be happy. Second line, still pretty happy, not necessarily exuberantly happy. Level of concern right here. This is kind of that line between the happiness and panic is right here. And then the trap magnet for teams that are well out of the playoff hunt and they're just playing spoiler at this point in time of the season. And so, yeah, 5 levels. I usually do 5 levels. So we're going to go ahead and start off with Washington. And despite having a loss last night, that was their first regulation loss at home in about 6 years, it seems. So I don't see any reason not to have Washington in the top row. I think it'd be crazy not to. The Capitals, what's going to happen in the playoffs remains the question. Can the success they've had in the regular season work in the postseason? Toronto, similar story here. Although the regular season things are going well, you're always going to have injury concerns here and there. Toronto having that as well. But yeah, the Toronto Maple Leafs, pretty good shape. They get the win last night against Boston, a game they trailed 3-0. So there you go. They get the big overtime win, and they kind of put the boots to Boston, allowing them to get 1 point, but not to get the 2. Florida, I don't know that I can't have Florida in the top row. It feels like Florida belongs in the top row. The Florida Panthers have fallen behind the Toronto Maple Leafs in the standings, but is there any reason to think Florida is not going to rally late in the season and win the division the same as they did last year? I could see it. I could absolutely see it happening. So Florida Panthers stay on the top row, and Tampa belongs in that top row as well. Tampa Bay's won, 6 in a row right now? Yeah, quietly they've moved up. They are 4th in the standings in that conference. So Tampa Bay's not done. Carolina, I'm going to put them next to concerned. Carolina's had some struggles recently, and last night's loss to Montreal was kind of an ugly one. So that definitely, to me, puts them at the level of concern that should be on that line there. New Jersey, I'm going to put them at that level as well. New Jersey and Carolina are fighting it out for second place in the division. If that's our first round series, your guess is as good as mine as to who's coming out of the first round there, because both teams have definitely had some recent issues in terms of winning, right? So with those two on that row, where does Detroit go? Does Detroit go right at the top? I'm debating with Detroit whether they go at the top row or the second row. But hey, if you're a Detroit fan, never thought you'd see the day this happened this late in the season. They definitely look like a playoff team, and for that reason, I'm going to put them in the top row. Detroit should be a playoff team this year. I don't think they're going to fall out this year. And so, yeah, things are going pretty darn well in Detroit. Columbus, I'm not going to put Columbus at the very top. They're in a playoff spot right now, but it's still touch and go as to whether they're going to hold that spot. I'm less confident with Columbus than I am with Detroit because of Ottawa. I'm going to put Ottawa in that row as well. Ottawa right now below the playoff line. If they win tonight, they're right back at that playoff line, and they're above it as the number 2 wild card, although they have to beat Winnipeg to do it. So Ottawa, I see reason to put them on that second row, not the top row. Ottawa trying to make the playoffs. Columbus trying to make the playoffs. No one expected Columbus to be in the race for the playoffs this year, and it's kind of been fun to watch. The New York Rangers, I'm going to put them here too. I'm not going to put them in this area here. They're definitely not panicked and definitely not a trap game. The Rangers are staying in the hunt, and they're not that far out. So for the New York Rangers, they could very well end up ruining a lot of people's days if they snatch a spot away from one of these teams, or I guess possibly Detroit, although I don't think that's going to happen. Boston, is it panic with Boston? It's not concern. I kind of feel like it has to be panic with Boston. This is a team that's trended in the wrong direction this year and should be sellers at the deadline. Sweeney seems to be telling us without telling us that they're going to be sellers at the deadline. But what's the plan going forward with Boston? That, as a Bruins fan, is where I have an issue. Is what is the plan going forward? Are they going to just try to rearm during the summer and go for it again next year? Because there's some risk to that too. When your team starts to age out of contention, there are general managers that will fight it for as long as they can. Detroit being at the top of the board. Part of the reason I think why the rebuild took so long is because they fought against it for so long. So Boston, I hope, doesn't fight it, but definitely I think panic's right there. Montreal, I mean it's tough to get mad about Montreal, and I don't know that they're far enough back to qualify them as a trap game. So I'm going to put Montreal in the second row. They're not a playoff team, but I mean, they got that big win last night. They've won both games coming out of the break. They're trying to make Kent Hughes' job difficult, basically. The Montreal Canadiens want to make sure that, he's not just going to sell. Odds are we're probably going to see a couple of players get moved that are on pending expirations of their deals, but I don't think we'll see like a massive sell off. Philadelphia is a trap game. I think the Flyers understand they're not going to make the playoffs this year, but they're a trap game. And they showed last night against Pittsburgh like they can be good. They played a very good game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are not on the board yet because they are beneath Philadelphia in the standings. But yeah, the Flyers definitely at this point I think are a trap game. They make you work for it. Oh, Islanders. Is it panic with the Islanders? Yeah, I'll put it next to panic. But similar reason as Boston. What's the plan going forward? What will Lou try to do this summer in order to maybe pivot and get back into the playoff picture next year? What will the plan be for the New York Islanders? I don't think we know the answer to that just yet. Pittsburgh, I'm going to put Pittsburgh next to the panic as well. Yes, Kyle Dubas has gone out and started getting young players and some draft picks here and there. But when you've got Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and they're older players, and their contracts are there, and they're still going to be there for a bit. I do think there's reason for panic around Pittsburgh. Not a tremendous amount. I would almost put them into trap game, but you kind of got to be winning games and playing well to be qualified as a trap game to me, which is why Buffalo to me is a trap. They showed that last night against Anaheim. They were down 2-0 going into the third. They came back and won the game. It'd be inspiring if they were anywhere near the playoff picture, but they're not. So right now, Buffalo's playing spoiler, which the one thing that I always think when I see a team winning games when they're nowhere near playoff contention is, please don't let the general manager watch this and go, you know what, we're actually not that bad, guys. This team's actually pretty good. Why don't we just keep things as they are? And maybe next season, because if a GM comes out and says, we think next season this group can win, yeah, Buffalo fans won't accept that. That's just not going to happen. So that's the East. That's how I see things in the East. You guys can let me know why I'm wrong in the comment section below, although this is just a fun video that I do every 2 weeks for exactly that, for fun. Winnipeg has to be at the top of the board. They've won 10 in a row. Like, I could try to put Winnipeg here and argue it and say, well, Winnipeg clearly, the issue for the Winnipeg Jets is they're just winning too much, and it's making people concerned about trying to live up to that. No, I can't. I can't. Maybe on April the 1st, I can do a kind of a joke version of the Panic Index. I'd have to make sure that everybody understood it was a joke, though, because I've tried to do like that kind of video before. People will be like, can't believe he's serious about this, because I'm not. Anyways, Winnipeg, I look at the captain's hat. Nothing is serious in this video. Dallas, not in the top row. I'm going to put them on the second row. The full 60 minutes is escaping them a bit again. This is a team that at times it's felt like their focus isn't quite where you want it to be. They could use a bit more scoring from Stankoven, for instance. He's fallen off after a really good start to the season. So there's definitely not a reason to put them on concern, but definitely not at the top of the board. Vegas, second row. Not top row. I don't feel like they're playing as well as we know they can. They took that loss against LA the other night. There's no shame in that. The LA Kings are an excellent home team, but there's just, I don't know, there's something missing. Even that game against Vancouver, at certain points it felt like Vancouver could have stolen it if they could have finished a little better. And so, yeah, I'm not going to put Vegas down here because, they are first in their division, but a little bit of concern, sure. Minnesota. Whew. The injuries mean you kind of have to have that. There's so many injuries. Now, Joel Eriksson Ek is out. This is a team that's just one after another, after another, after another. It's just injuries upon injuries upon injuries. And so, for that reason, I think Minnesota belongs in the concerned row of things. The Oilers, the Oilers. 4 losses in a row and not looking good in those losses either. I think the alarming part is like if a team's losing but they look good, then they're going to come out of it. But the Oilers just something's off. And I'm not sure how you fix that. Obviously, they need more scoring on the wings. We know this. This is an old storyline. At some point, I think Chris Knobloch's going to be forced to put Ryan Nugent-Hopkins back on the wing full time. I know why he wants Nugent-Hopkins down the middle, though, because you have McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins as your top 3 centers. That's fantastic. But the problem is they don't have the wingers to play with them. So, yeah, the Oilers, I think there's a reason to panic right now. They just seem to be trending in the wrong direction at a very bad time in the season to do so. The LA Kings. Second row. Second row for the Kings. Not quite top row, but they're playing well. They're 3 points back of Edmonton with 3 games in hand, and tonight they're hosting the Vancouver Canucks, a team that they've shown over the last couple of years they know how to control their attack. So the LA Kings, I think, are playing pretty darn well. If they get home ice in that series with Edmonton in the first round, because it seems like that's the series in the first round every year. Do they win it this year? Because they've been excellent at home, so maybe, right? Colorado. Okay, so for the Avs, is it panic? Is that where we're at with the Avs? I don't feel like the Avs belong next to panic. You guys can let me know, especially if you're Avs fans, if you're in a panic. But concern is definitely, I think, the highest I can put them. I can't put them up here. There are some issues with the Colorado Avalanche, and their play has been not where you want it to be. They're dealing with injuries too, much the same as Minnesota here, but there's just something a little bit off with Colorado, and it is definitely fixable, but we'll see if it gets fixed. Calgary, they're above the playoff line. I'm going to put them in the second line. They're not comfortably above the playoff line, and there's definitely some teams that could chase them down. But for Calgary, no reason for panic. Definitely not a trap game. So yeah, the LA's here, Calgary's here, and both of them I think are going to be pretty happy. So Calgary's up here and Edmonton's down here for people in Alberta keeping track of the Alberta teams, or just people keeping track of the Alberta teams as it is. Vancouver's panicked. And you know what? I should have done that sideways. That kind of works. I'm not. Let's keep it professional as I tip my hat. The Vancouver Canucks. It's been a season. It's been like a 3-year long season. It feels. I really think what we're seeing is this is a team that is good, not great. And when your team is good, not great, you're gonna be in the mix maybe for the playoffs, but you could miss. And for Vancouver, that's where we're at. Besser may end up leaving. There is the chance Pettersson gets traded in the offseason. He's not getting traded now. Just wait. Hold all your posts till July, because his no movement clause kicks in on the 1st of July, so he may get moved before that. Think of the draft. But at this point in time, he doesn't have trade value. Trading him for the sake of trading him just sends a message to the rest of the team that everybody's going to go, that it's going to go into a rebuild. And I don't want to see that. I really don't want to see a rebuild in Vancouver, because that could take a while. And I don't know how old I'm going to be when this team's good again. So Vancouver, I agree with the panic in Vancouver. Utah, things are pretty good in Utah. You know what? I'm going to put Utah in the top row because I know Utah fans are going to say put us in the top row. So fine. I don't know if Utah's going to complete this run towards a playoff position, but it is nice to see them playing games that matter as we get ready for March. So Utah's definitely played well, and yeah, Utah. I think the top row is probably the best place for them. It is their first year there, so sure. St. Louis, they've played well. Yes, I'm going to leave them next to concerned because there's still a lot of talk about what they're going to do at the trade deadline. I honestly think if Doug Armstrong decides, you know what, That's not going to happen this year. Going on a run is great and everything, but you have to think about the future. If he takes that attitude and he trades off some players who have some value and a lot of interest, he could build up a lot of future assets for this team. And he could, depending on the moves he makes, leave it where they could still be running towards the playoffs next year, and in the running for maybe one of the top 4 spots, top 3 spots in their division. St. Louis is interesting because they're not that far off, but they don't really look like a playoff team a lot of the time either. Anaheim's 500. We're 57 games into their season. They're 25-25-7. I believe that's their record. That's a minor miracle for Anaheim at this point in time in the season, considering some of the struggles they've had. So I don't see any reason to have Anaheim lower than this. And they're not far enough out for me to call them a trap game. They're just not, because it really is anybody's guess as to what's going to happen in the West. Seattle's a trap game, and I mean, they do kind of have to be playing better to be qualified as a trap game. Right now, the Penguins magnet is looking down at it and not very happy because I put the Penguins into panic, but the Penguins are it's been awful for the Penguins. It hasn't been great for Seattle either, agreed, but I'll put Seattle under the trap category. Nashville's a trap game too. The Preds are not making the playoffs. They know they're not making the playoffs. I don't think there's panic at this point in time because they've been in this position now for months. I don't think there's any reason for panic. It will be interesting to see what Barry Trotz does at the trade deadline. Chicago. It feels like it is panic time with Chicago, doesn't it? The rebuild is slow. And so since the rebuild's been as slow as it has been, and it does feel like they've kind of been taking steps backwards recently, that Chicago, maybe a bit more reason for panic, I guess. So I'm going to put Chicago next to the panic side of things. I don't know what you do. I think the coaching changes worked mostly. Although I think it's just a matter of the team isn't very good. This is a roster that is not very good. So when Kyle Davidson made the change behind the bench and said this team isn't the worst team in the NHL, if you look at their roster and you compare it to other rosters in the NHL, it very well might be the worst roster in the NHL. San Jose is going to be qualified as a trap game. The San Jose Sharks have been at the bottom of the power rankings, but they're trying. The effort is there, and you can see the positive improvement from guys like Celebrini, Smith, Eklund, guys like the young players and their chemistry with one another. So these are the things you're watching if you're San Jose, and they almost beat Winnipeg the other night. So for the San Jose Sharks, it does feel like even though they're winless in 6, that they're getting back to the way they were playing earlier in the season, very early in the season, and their record just doesn't reflect it yet. I hope they win 20 games this season. I do. I feel like they're at this point the wins record they've got, it feels like should be a little bit better. But once they traded Blackwood, I think that was where it became really, really difficult to get those wins, because Blackwood was playing really well in San Jose, and he has kept that up in Colorado, although Colorado has other concerns. So that being said, that's your panic index for February 26th of 2025. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. And this is not meant to be as serious as the power rankings. Just more of a fun way of looking at things. So 2 of the teams I root for are next to panic, and one of them is in the second row. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. It's greatly appreciated. I will talk to you again soon.